Warehouse Fly Box. Today we're going to tie a streamer pattern that is should be a standby in pretty much anybody's box. It's the Mohair Leech, and there's a number of varieties that you'll find out there for the Leech. Some with a tail, some without. But it's a standard pattern. It's been around for years. It's a wonderful crossover pattern. This thing fishes warm water to cold water, large or small. Pretty much wherever there's fish, it works. I tie it in a variety of colors. My most common colors are purple, black, olive, and I tie a rust with a tan tail that does very well for me on trout. But let's go over how we tie it. It is a basic pattern, not a difficult pattern at all. I tie most of mine on a size 10 straight eye bugger hook, and I start out with 0.020 lead wire. I'll wrap it the length of the shank, starting at the point of the hook, not the full length. Starting at the point of the hook, I'll bring it forward. I like this pattern weighted. I prefer to fish it, and I leave it a full 2 eye lengths, at least 2 eye lengths short, because I don't like a bulky head on this pattern. I like it to taper thin. But I don't like to fish this pattern with split shot. And we'll start our thread, build a dam, and wrap back over. I don't like to fish this pattern with split shot. I like to fish this pattern weighted with a floating line. If I really need to get deep with this pattern, then I'll fish it with a sink tip, and in the last resort I'll put split shot on. But for the most part, I like it to stay with its own action, just with a weighted body. And then after you bind down your lead, you're going to bring your thread back to the barb, point of the barb. Next, you're going to tie in your tail. I use Marabou, and what I do is, to start and make this manageable, you can use water, you can use whatever you want. I'll lick my fingers once, sweep it back, and that'll control the flyers long enough for me to tie it in. I measure the length of the hook, the entire hook, pinch there, and I'm going to cut off about a 1/4 inch. What I'm doing is I'm cutting approximately the distance from the back of the lead to the tie-in point. I'm just going to leave about that much stubble, maybe a little bit more, just so it covers the transition, and we're going to tie it in. And that's going to bring you to a tail equal to the length of the shank, or the length of the hook itself. Next, you're going to tie in your mohair. If you look, mohair is generally directional. If you look close, this is wound going left to right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one end, make sure I got it going in the right direction. Yeah, it's this way. I'll tie in the standing end, basically. Clean out a butt end. And we're going to tie that down in the same area that you tied in your Marabou. That'll keep the body fairly close. And then bring your thread forward to the eye. Now when you wrap this, it's going to look ugly, but at the end you'll clean it up. What I do is take your yarn, sweep it down, get the fibers pulled out fairly well, and sweep it to the rear, and you're going to wrap it forward and sweep with each turn. It's going to pinch down your Marabou at first. Don't worry about that. You can clean that out easy enough with a bodkin after you're done. And you're just going to keep moving forward, sweeping as many fibers as you can. You don't have to get too concerned with it because it's going to pick out, and it's going to come out as you fish it too. So you're just going to work your yarn forward, covering, just being careful to cover your lead or your underbody. If you miss a little bit, it's not really going to affect your pattern because the mohair itself, the fibers are going to cover up your gap. But this is not a neat pattern, but it's a very effective pattern. The action that this mohair yarn and the Marabou together has is unique to the properties of these materials. You really can't duplicate it with anything else. And just take your time working it forward. You may have portions of your yarn that don't have many fiber or have very few fibers, and that's okay. This pattern will cover up any discrepancies really that you have, and has more than enough fibers on it. And when you get to the eye, lift the fibers out of the way as best you can so you don't trap too many, and tie it off. I tie this regardless of the color of the mohair or the materials. I use black thread for these leeches. And sweep the fibers out of your way so you don't trap any more than you have to. Build a small head. Like I said, it'll be ugly when you tie it, but you'll see how easy it is to fix what you're looking at. Trim off your butt ends. Now, as you see, you spiraled everything back. Just stick your bodkin in there, into that loop. The section that's around the hook bend and pinning down your Marabou, and pull it back. And when I get it to where I want it to start out with, I sweep everything back to the end of the Marabou, and I pinch and just rip those real long fibers from the mohair out. I'll just pop them off, just for my own. You don't need to do that. It's not going to affect the fly. It's just my habit. And there you go. The Mohair Marabou Leech. Standard pattern all over the country. You'll see it everywhere you go. It's usually in every fly shop. This is my favorite way to tie it. And the patterns that I fish most often with the mohair. I strip retrieve this. You can bring it through lily pads. You can bring it shallow. You can let it sink and retrieve back to the surface. Works great from a float tube, casting to the bank and retrieving back into deep water. Great pattern, as effective if not more effective at times than the woolly bugger will be, and we all know how effective that pattern is. Give it a try, adjust your colors, you might be surprised. Good luck, see you in the water.